Oh, God damn it.
Yeah, so now we're being recorded. We'll have to watch our language, but we won't. Just as a pre-read, if we do decide to share this with anyone, probably not safe for work. Of us, but we'll try and keep it clean.
They used to say, you're live on air. Try not to swear. I love the way they used to say, "Try not to swear." It's like we know you're gonna swear. So
No, so where do we come from for this? Well, we had a kind of over the Easter break. We had a walk out in the countryside and
lovely.
in the rain.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
wet.
pleasant weather. But yeah, just trying to put the world to rights. A couple of pale, stale male guys trying to put the world to rights, as you do. Um, and there were some interesting discussions. And I think, for me, it was quite telling that we both kind of had drawn similar conclusions about some of the challenges we face. And I don't know, I don't know if you can remember enough of the conversation to frame it in a couple of sentences.
Yeah, sorry, I was just tidying my desk because I thought, well, if I end up doing some drawing, you don't want to see all my rubbishy Kanban stuff, so I'm just kind of like throwing that away. Yeah, so the whole, I mean, it was lovely to spend some time. Actually, just more than I think we were talking about work for about a third of it, right? So
Yeah.
But the whole premise was the whole conversation kind of ended up coming around to my three circles, and I was saying how much for those who have watched Demolition Man, you have the three seashells, which seems to have its own mythical thing about it, but it's got nothing to do with those. But it was my way in my head of describing what's really going on with all this agile stuff, right? Shall I try and draw? Should I? I don't actually. It might be.
It's going to be better than the coffee cups and the plates of empty cabinets
Yeah.
in a coffee shop, right?
So I can't guarantee. It's. Oh yeah, of course. Now this is
Yeah,
the
you've
fun
got a
bit.
blurry background, haven't you?
Yeah, because I blurred my background because my background's rubbish. This is it's okay. I mean, it might be a little bit too zoomed in, but we'll see. I've got to move the mic and everything. So yeah. So what was, I've drawn this picture multiple times over the last. It's got to be 6 months plus, and the way I was kind of trying to articulate it is in the sphere of agile, you kind of G-L-I-T-Y. Yeah, that'll do. Or what did I call it? I called it enablers, didn't I?
Yeah, I think so. We talked about a bunch of different things that sit in that space.
Tech enablers and people. I think we had frameworks
Yeah.
over here as well, and I was kind of like saying it's like a kind of for me, that's not a Venn diagram because they don't cross over. Brilliant, Andy, good start. But for me, it was kind of where I see it is you have this sphere over here. When people talk about kind of business agility, they're thinking over here. And when they're kind of, and then you go, no, this used to be called delivery.
Yeah, that's right.
That was it. Delivery agility and people agility. And it was basically my way of kind of trying to articulate that somewhere over here you have a whole bunch of agile coaches running around talking this stuff to leaders, and we're going to lead you and not terminate you, transform, that's the one. We're going to lead you and transform you in all these various different kind of weird coachy ways. And then you've got kind of somewhere over here you kind of like the DevOps land lives now. Like, if anybody's watching this, are going to go, oh my god, but of course you can't pigeonhole all these things into one. Yeah, but let's be real, right? DevOps is born from like a tech enabling thing that was trying to fix this problem of not having any tech enablers that are looking after the delivery system, right? And it's trying to bring the business and everything closer. But realistically, DevOps, from my point of view, was spawned out of a need to get things done faster and with better quality, etc.
Yep.
DevOps to me, right?
I think it may have bled into some of those spaces, but it's certainly, my interpretation is it started there 100%.
Oh god,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's where working with some great people at there was a guy called Paul Swartout who wrote a book, an early book. I don't think whether it was DevOps. I think he titled it, but it was born from my perspective. We were doing this in about 2008, 9, 10, 11 in Nokia, and it was born out of that need to deliver quicker. And then somewhere over here, you have the people agility. And I don't think I've got a title for that yet. I don't know what land that lives in, but you know, kind of like for me, this is a mental health and well-being space. Some people will recognize this now as the buzzword of so I see it as psych safety. See why. But it's looking after like people in terms of their I don't know, motivation. And you'll get some great people, like a really good friend of mine, and actually Tim, you know him very well. We'll talk about kind of James Scrimshire. We'll talk about kind of you go and fix this side of things, and you're going to make these people really happy, right? And you fix, you know, these kind of this thing, and you'll make these people like really happy. And the big problem is well, you probably, you know, if you pay people more, you'll make everybody happy, right? But but where this was the thing, the whole thing I was getting to was coaches, agile coaches, or you know, people consuming agile as a thing, as a monetizable product, tend to get sold a perspective, a lens. They tend to get sold, you know, one of these things. Oh, you know, we're going to make you leaner, faster, smarter. Oh, yeah, you're going to be able to, like, you know, deliver everything, you know, test-driven development, you know, instant, you know, delivery, all that kind of stuff. You know, we're going to do all the fluffy stuff, and all your people are going to be empowered, which was another thing we laughed about the other day. But you know, you're now empowered. Good luck.
Why aren't you doing things? I've empowered you.
Yeah, yes, we've empowered you. So this was the kind of the picture I've been talking about, is where you get sold agile, you get drawn into agile, or whatever it is, however you want to describe that. But it's always focused on one side of, you know, so you kind of go and focus on one of these areas. And typically, realistically, if this is somewhere here, and this is where this model hasn't been elaborated too deeply, somewhere in here lies Scrum, you know, with a lens on people, of course, but it is a lens. And this is the thing. It's like, which tool do you pick to enable all three of these spheres to exist, you know, to coexist? Because if you focus only on one, you recognize you'll get problems in the others. You know, is it a panacea that you have all three? Don't know the answer to that. Don't have enough data. But I certainly think this is my view on things, that there is a balance to be struck, and an understanding of too much in each one of these could potentially lead you down a kind of, you know, a terrible and horrible path, and all those kind of things. So it's a bit of a monologue, but it was kind of, I think it needed to be explained in order to kind of talk about what, you know, or what we want to talk about going.
Yeah, I think, you know, names are challenging, right? But I guess the domain that you and I probably spend most of our time in is that business agility, enterprise agile coaching, whatever you want to call that, working with senior leaders to better organize value delivery through better understanding. Sometimes that is bled down into let's not call it the DevOps space, because I am not an expert in DevOps, but in the practical delivery processes that we follow that enable the value maximization. The thing that atrophies, the thing that dies on the vine, is people, right? And I think that balance is not there in many of the cases that I've seen, and it's a really difficult conversation to have. I think, in my experience, and if we do share this video and you're someone who lives in the C-suite, I'm not including you in this conversation, but quite often you get smiles and nods of, I want my people to be healthy and fit and have great well-being and feel, you know, autonomous and have a purpose. And yes, I see all that as valuable, and I need to make money.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And to the point where I've even stopped talking about the people to those folks, because I see it as a big turnoff. It's not a language that they naturally resonate with. I think they want to. Think they want to, but their motivations generally, and I'm lumping in a whole group of people into one caricature, I think they want to be better, but they're not motivated to be better. The motivation seems to always come back to the bottom line, which is, it's kind of appropriate. That's what they're accountable for, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and I think so. I want to do a conversation. I want to do a conversation. I want to do a chat about culture. I've just got this lovely kind of weird view of culture, but that's another probably 3-circle diagram. But there's something in this which is around. Yes, gosh, yeah, yes. We've all probably worked in an organization where everyone goes, yeah, lip service to everyone's mental health well-being, and you get like, it's, you know, you get a gym membership for free, right? And it's like, woo, that's meant to, you know. Yes, there are studies, and yes, there is information out there and data that will say providing people with access to gyms, providing people with access to lots of mental health and well-being support can help. Yes, absolutely. Yes, we still need a balance with, you know, we still need to be profitable, right? There is a difference between the organizations that look at profitability and mental health almost separately, right? As a this is one incentive and this is another, and we're going to kind of, you know, part fund each of them. There's a difference between that and the kind of the crossover organizations where you're working, and we talked about this, you're working as part of a team where the magic just happens, and there is that beautiful moment where the ability to look after one's mental health, well-being, go to the gym, take advantage of all the great things, and you feel a sense of also commitment to go and deliver and make that business profitable. And that is very different to feeling like you're a servant to an organization. We were talking kind of, I have a big theory about everybody should feel like they are running the business. They are part of that business. They are, you know, part of the family of that business. And there's a big difference between feeling like you're part of a business, part of a family. You want that business to be profitable. You want it to do some stuff. And the organizations which are just going, yeah, you're part of a big cog and, you know, we need to be profitable, you know, go to the gym.
Just reminded me of something that we were talking about there. And the analogy I think that I used whilst we were chatting was that the people who are doing the work, and we could talk about, you know, Gemba and all of those things, but the people who do the work, where the rubber hits the road, are effectively your organizational senses, you know, like sight, sound, touch, smell, proprioception, whatever, right? It doesn't mean you're going bald, right? Whatever. Anyway, but you know, but they are your organizational senses. So the closer we can get those to strategic decision making, having a voice, the better we'll be at pivoting to our organizational needs. Doesn't mean we have to do everything, right? But doing things, making decisions in isolation, not listening to your senses, not being mindful. And I think we went off on a track here of talking about mindful businesses and holistic businesses and Zen, and it's like, okay, they're immediate turnoffs. But yes. I think they do portray the kind of thinking that we're talking about, which is a whole world view of the people in your business and the objectives that you're trying to achieve. Now, what I think the next step on from that is how, right? Because everybody talks about that. We want to be one big happy clappy family, right? And we want to look after our people. We want to do these things so that we can achieve our business goals and objectives. I think, where do we take it from there, right? What's the next step? If we can agree that Venn diagram is a model, which no model's not true, but it's a useful model to frame a conversation.
Yeah.
What do we do to get that Venn diagram to be a more healthy picture?
So it's investment. Is it, as you were talking, I was thinking, I know where he's going. He's going to ask me a question, and for me, it always comes down to some level of investment. You need to make it. You need to either invest in your business or your tech enablers or something in there to readdress that balance. I've got a horrible feeling the way the industry is going, the way the market is going, the way, if we look at I mean, it's in the news today about the slowdown in the economy, etc., and the UK being one of the lowest, in terms of
Russia is what I read.
Yes, yeah, we're not doing well, and I've got this horrible feeling you're actually going to see more and more organisations put their investment strategies into getting work done at any cost versus recognizing realistically, and we all know and we see it a million times on LinkedIn, that people are people are your asset, etc. But I've got a horrible feeling we're gonna start to move away from that, and those memes are going to start popping up more and more and more and more, and people are going to really suffer. I mean, that's a terrible view, and I don't wish that to happen. But I think unless there's a readdress of the value that looking after your people, but not just in that picture, which is just people agility, but it's also how do you enable those people to benefit your business? So what investment strategies do you have? And I always say, I always feel terrible whenever I talk about it, but training. I was reading something recently. I need to bring it up like in the forefront, but I was reading something recently, which was a study into consistent training, the benefit of you and I have worked or have been part of organizations, that have had consistent training, training to fail, training to overcome, recognizing the benefit of that. And there was a study that I read recently, which was kind of all around that and how beneficial that kind of consistent training in practice, good practice, and obviously failure practice. And I think this is probably the time that organizations actually need to be thinking about what training do I need to be putting in place? Not just the, do I need to do the kind of the regulatory stuff? Yes, that's really super important. But I've got a whole bunch of really super intelligent people. How can I make them feel like they are part of the family more? And that will take investment, not just providing them with a gym membership. It really is about how can I engage this bunch of people to feel like they can turn this organization around for us.
So in lean times, it's a tough ask for people to invest in things like that. So I think what we need to consider then is how do you frame that in terms of the return on your investment? Now, it's really easy to kind of go, well, these two things are completely divorced. I'm throwing money into that pot and I won't get a return on that investment. But actually, I think when you've got very few people I've learned have actually had the opportunity to work in high performing or hyper performing teams and organizations. In my experience, and I've had the pleasure and the joy of being in two teams that have operated that way in a career of 35 years, twice that's happened to me. The difference is when times are tough, when times are lean, people lean into the work, rather than feeling like they are that cog in the machine, that they're having a whip cracked at them. And it doesn't mean that whip cracking isn't going on. It doesn't mean that you aren't communicating the desperate need to get that thing out there, to be making us money, to keep us afloat. It's that the interpretation of that is not the boss is barking at me to get this done, and I'm never going to get it done in a 7-hour day. It's more, I've got a vested interest in the well-being of this group, of keeping this cohesive group together, and I'm prepared to go to the lengths that I can go to within my capable ability, right? And no one's suggesting that you go and live in the office, right? But people will pull a bit further, a bit harder, a bit stronger in the direction when they're invested that way.
See, the funny thing is, it's not. So when people think about kind of mental health well-being, people always, again, I've said it, you go to the kind of the obvious well-being strategies, but the things we know that help people are as simple as clear goals, as the organization providing the information for people to get behind, right? And then, however that gets cascaded down through into whatever structure or in whichever way you're working on. But if you have a clear goal and you can understand that why, you're going to invest your own time So investment, yes, it sounds monetary just from the business down, but also you have, I guess, as an organization, you have a duty of care to your employees of your organization to be able to provide them with some sense of purpose. Right? Why are we doing this thing? And telling people that what were you saying? You're now enabled, or whatever. What were you saying? You're now empowered, right? You can't just tell people they're empowered. They have to feel and have the ability to be empowered. It's very, very different.
I wrote a thing a while back about that empowerment, right? Built around the autonomy, mastery, and purpose, which I think they've come out of the psyche, right? They were really quite prevalent in terms of how do we organize ourselves for success. And I don't think they're talked about as much now as they used to be. And I wish we could go back to that. But the empowerment message there I was saying is the job of leaders is to give power away, not that they can take it back or share it, right? You divest that power, right? And that's what empowerment is. It's not, I've empowered you to do something, and then when you've done it, I'm gonna be judgmental or critical or anything else. I trust you to do this, and that's why you've got the authority to do that. And I don't think that's wired in our DNA. And I think it comes back to what you were saying about in lean times, and if we're heading for leaner times, there'll be much less of that, right?
Yeah.
We will fall back to previous positions, which is I need to gain more and more and more control over the situation because things are dire and desperate and challenging. Even if they're not, I feel like they are, or they could be.
Yeah.
So therefore, I need to exert more and more control. And I think with that Venn diagram, that emotion of senior leaders, I need to gain more control. I need to manage these risks, which are fundamentally unmanageable, but I need to get more control of those risks. It will divert people. It pulls that people circle further and further away and shrinks it, right?
Yeah, and I think I've pulled it back up because it's something we keep talking about. So I was trying to figure out, because usually we can spotlight it, but I can't for some reason spotlight it on this. I don't know whether it's only because there's two people, but I was thinking, there's a lot of organizations which are going through redundancies, right? And so what are they trying to solve? They're trying to solve this problem, which is their delivery agility and some kind of lack of ability and funding, from a business point of view, by impacting this. And you have to kind of question that is that really your only / best strategy? And I think that and what happens afterwards, right? So you and I've been through redundancy. I think it's okay to say you've been through redundancy, and whether you survived redundancy or whether you've been part of and kicked out of redundancy, there's always that ill feeling that it puts a huge amount of mistrust into this part of your organization. It's like, again, it's kind of, a little bit of fear is not a bad thing, right? At any point I could lose my job. Yeah, fine. Work hard. That's what you're there for. Some of it, right? But you shouldn't have an innate fear that at any time, regardless of whether I work hard or not, I'm going to get the boot. And so when organizations treat people like that without, again, the strategies behind looking after the people either going through redundancy or afterwards, it can really impact these two other factors, right? People's motivation drops. So, your ability, to influence your business and maybe, out into the marketplace, people's motivation drops and delivery starts getting hit. We're delivering less. We're not really as highly motivated towards, winning at a business strategy point of view. So this is why I keep coming back to this, because I think, you're putting too much attention in any one of these can actually, have some horrible detrimental effect. It's not a... And it's like, we were talking about the Cynefin and Stacey models, right? Whether you like them or loathe them, I'm not going to go there. But my perspective on them, right? My perspective is it is my perspective, right? So from this is a perspective model. Like, where am I right now, and where am I looking at my business, right? So if I'm sitting here and I'm saying, well, we're spending lots and lots in tech enablers and all this kind of stuff, but these two things are suffering, what's going on, right? Or if I'm over here, you know, I'm looking at this, or, you know, you might look at it from a different way. But I think we can't ignore that it all comes down here. It's just recognizing, I think at some point, is the impact of these people, positive and negatively, will always influence these two other things. You know, whether I can't personally see a fourth dimension for this. And, you know, when I originally drew it, I had horribly, and I don't want to put it there, but somewhere in here lies, you know, loveliness. whatever you want to call that. I'm not gonna call it the A word, but somewhere in here lies loveliness. And, you know, with typically Venn diagrams, what you would have is it's find a suitable color, but being colorblind, it's probably not going to be, you know, somewhere in there you'd have, you know, in these crossover, you'd have these mini crossover bits, right? And there's another one. There's probably some descriptors about the practices, maybe behaviors that are going on in those spaces. So if you're kind of like high business and high people, you know, focused agility, you know, space, there's probably a nice descriptor for living in that. You know, what would that look like? Who would you class in that? And likewise, from a tech point of view, you might find organizations which are really, really super smart on people and tech, but actually, you know, less profitable, or, you know, actually suffering for whatever reason. So for me, I think it's quite interesting. And it's certainly something I would like to evolve a little bit more, just to be able to provide some kind of descriptors into these, you know, perhaps, and just kind of just be able to use this as a way of saying, look, you know, you are here, right? Where would you like to be? What does it look like for you,
Andy? So there's a story I told you about the startup I was at, right?
Yeah.
Acquired by a really large organization. If everybody search back on my LinkedIn profile, they'll probably find out who I'm talking about, right? But a small startup which was acquired by a huge multi national, and what they bought was the people who were absolutely super high performing. And I told you some stories about the sort of things that we achieved. Yeah. Lost your background blur and everything.
No, so I was trying to, there we go. So I was trying to share, and so I was trying to do two things at once. Then we can talk and we can see it. Look
Awesome.
at this. Genius.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, so prior to being acquired, we were doing reasonably well in all three of those sectors. If we weren't, we probably wouldn't have been acquired, right? But when the mothership came in and took us over, what they ended up having was actually pretty good people and pretty good tech and frameworks, but they didn't have a direction of travel, right? And after 18 months of me and a few others pestering them, my role there was effectively agile coach at that point, for that business unit, was, what do you want them to do, right? Because super smart people with 2 and 3 doctorates, for example, were on the tech, with super smart people, great, well, okay, reasonable technology. I can think of times when it was, but you know, we were doing the DevOps thing 15 years ago, right? We had delivery CI/CD pipelines, we had that automated testing, TDD, we had all of those things in place 15 years ago. We didn't have a direction. So these things do exist. These organizations exist where great people with a great set of tools at their ability, without the direction. And I'm sure we've seen great direction and great people without the tech enablers and frameworks. I mean, I'm sure that's quite a common model, right? And I'm sure there are many places you can go to where, you know, no, we need to go kick the mainframe if you want that to work. So we know that exists as well. But I think the fear that I have is that in our current climate, we're going to have more and more of these organizations with great technical enablers and frameworks and a great business model and direction and well communicated, and just not having the people able to deliver against it. And I think that's the challenge we face right now, is that we are potentially building organizations and structures where those people aren't able to do it. Even if you're if you're listening to this and you're the CEO of a large company and you go, look, my people aren't going to be impacted, we're good, right? I've got a great pipeline, we've got great funding, I've got a good reserve, I can weather this storm. I know I can. It's great. I've got a great CFO and a great team behind me to do this. Your people are still going to be sitting there watching the news and going, oh, it could come tomorrow. I know I am, and I know everybody else, a load of people are. So we need to get more focus, more of that kind of holistic organization. And I won't use that word again, I promise. But looking at all three of those dimensions, and I think the people thing is at risk.
So we need a swear jar for holistic. I can't stand that word. There's a few things I can't stand, and holistic is one of them. it just oh god, it sends.
Well, you've now used it more often than me, so
Well, it's just a catch-all for not being. It's a poor. Here we go. I'm going to make you feel really bad. It's a poor excuse for being able to describe something else. It's like an all-encompassing or something that is kind of looking at the total picture. And I know it's a cheap way, but for me, it reminds me. I just think when somebody says holistic, I just think of people standing there with those ting bells, right? It's like we're gonna do it holistically. Ding! It's like no.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not talking about the woo-woo and tree hugging stuff, but I am talking about thinking about it as an entire system, right? And that if one element of the system ceases to function effectively, the whole system ceases to function correctly.
So I mean, the systems. I've seen a lot of people think, looking at systems thinking and lots of people thinking about value streams and various versions of value streams, and there's kind of like depending on which, almost like which model you sign up for, and they're great, and I think it is the lost, to some degree, it's a lost art, but I think it's got to be like all of these things. It's a model, right? It's a way of viewing where you are right now, and also recognizing that, right, it is just a picture of where you are right now, without trying to figure out where you want to be. Where you are right now, understanding that is great, but it's not going to kind of, unless you really want to push yourself, it's not going to make you any better. It's like that analogy I said to you, Tim, which was having a whole bunch of and this is, again, if you're listening or watching this, you might recognize this as a picture, having a whole bunch of agile coaches running around an organization telling people they're overweight, and it's kind of, you're overweight, but nobody in that organization really wanting to go and run a 5K. but you're fat. Thanks for that. Who are you?
Can I have something actionable, please, rather than an insult?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it kind of goes back to that why, right? And I talked about that goal driven, and I was desperately in the background trying to find Locke's theory of goal setting. Sorry, I'm just remembering stuff off my uni course, which is kind of like the almost is it one of the origins? I think it's 1936 maybe. Might have to Google that. But it plays into that whole Dan Pink autonomy, mastery, purpose stuff. And actually, there are multiple, and some of the other things I was trying to Google in the background, I just can't get to hand, which are around that whole idea behind purpose. And the flaw for me with the Daniel Pink stuff is certainly when he talks about, the moment you pay people enough to take money, the idea of money off the table, that's it, right? So you have to pay people a lot of money or enough to take the idea of money off the table, otherwise it's still a motivator. There are others, right? There are other motivators, but we know, that sense of purpose has to be there, and give people autonomy and mastery. Yes, yeah, it's all good, right? We know that, but we kind of go into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We still need to satisfy the basic needs, right? And money will be there, because it's part of the keeping a roof over our head comfort stuff. Yeah. So kind of, where did that waffly stuff end us? I don't know. I mean,
Can I ask a question then? So in those kind of segments where these things overlap, if you'd drawn a Venn diagram which actually had overlapping circles, it would make
all right.
But can we start maybe talking about what the measures, what the metrics might be, which would give us insight into our balance? Is it possible to do that, right? Bearing in mind that this is an emergent topic. So if someone,
i.e. we're making it up right now, is that what you mean?
We are making it up. Be open and honest about that, right? We are making it up off the back of a conversation. Felt like it had some legs.
So I think in here there's certainly there's certainly things like staff turnover, mental health support, well-being metrics. There's something I was going to talk about. I found a stat which I've just blooming well lost, and I need to find it again. Hang on, just give me. But it was around I think minimum 7.4 million a year is lost to this idea of quiet quitting. Yeah, 7. And that's dollars. So kind of like studies saying. But also absenteeism, presenteeism. This is kind of like these are measures you could in your organization look at the impact of your strategy, good or negative, in terms of this stuff, right? The mental health, the mental well-being, how people are feeling towards being part of your organization. There are well-established metrics out there.
Yeah.
For those interested, off the top of my head, wellbeingatwork.org probably has some good studies. There is the CIPD. I think Deloitte have done some studies in here as well, and there's one other which I can't get off the top of my head, but there are no, it'll come to me in a minute. So there are lots of studies in terms of people and well-being metrics, loads of them, and the cost of all of those not being there. And likewise, right? So we could look at, the classic, and this is one of the things that always gets me, like the return on investment, the revenue, profitability, loss, etc. All of that stuff that no organization ever measures, right? And that's a whole different.
I was just thinking about something there. Right? So we've got some potential for measuring our effectiveness in the interface between business agility and people agility, right? Or people. Right, maybe we should draw a line through agility, right? But we've got some metrics that we could bring to bear. There are probably some really useful tips and tricks if you're a senior leader as well, in how you can improve that space. I was just thinking back to, I actually left a role, right, because I asked my boss on 2 or 3 occasions, please don't send me an email with a meeting invite which says we need to talk. It's just a trigger for anxiety. I'll sit there for 3 days, in near tears, because you've triggered an emotional response to me with that. So there are some tips and tricks that I think we could help teach senior leaders in how they engage with people, certainly under times of stress and anxiety, so that they can be a lot clearer about that communication. Because I suspect, as I said before, people right now are incredibly nervous. Bearing in mind that people in that business agility circle of Venn diagram are also people.
Just to shock you, actually, I got it wrong. It's 7.8 trillion.
Yes.
So 7.8 trillion is lost in productivity due to people being disengaged. That's the Gallup State of Global Workplace 2022. That's equal to 11% of the global GDP. All right. So if people don't think that well-being and mental health impacts stuff, and people being engaged and motivation at work, yeah, there you go. That'll do
it. You're speaking to, I mean, largely you're speaking to or preaching to the choir, or speaking to the converted. They know that, they believe that, they don't do anything with that knowledge.
I don't think they do. I don't think. I think there is an awareness. There's not an understanding.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. There's certainly very little action.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So yeah, we know it impacts people, but just crack on, right? That's.
If you want to know where your next jump in value is for your organization, maybe it isn't in cutting headcount then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in enabling that headcount people to be more effective, to be more engaged, to be on your side in the boat with you, bailing out rather than bailing water in, right? And that's what we're advocating, trying to foster in this. That was a question, not a statement.
No, no, absolutely right. So the idea is, I mean, I call it investment. If you want to come up with a different term for it, but it is recognizing you have a bunch of people who could be highly motivated given the chance.
Well, not all investment is money as well, right? So the example that I gave about just really thinking about how you communicate to people as a leader in an organization where you've got a stressed workforce, and you have at the moment. If you think you haven't, you're wrong. um, that costs, that there is an investment there. There's an investment in time, and maybe there's an investment in education in terms of how can I better frame.
Yeah, but it's simple things like, you know, your developers who've been complaining for years that they can't get shit done. You know, yeah, we swore, right? Uh this is, I mean, you know, you've been there, I've been there a million times over. Tech enablers, right? You know, the people doing the job, the people doing the work, they're going to complain about the tools, and yes, it may impact the, in the short term, the ability to deliver stuff, right? And that's what you will see. In the long term, you're going to have really highly motivated, and this is the thing, right? Your tech will draw in better people. That will draw in people that want to learn the latest stuff, whatever that's going on.
Okay, so I'm going to put devil's advocate hat on here,
Yep.
and say,
Go for it.
I'm trying to tighten my belt. I'm trying
Yep.
to weather a coming storm.
Yep.
I haven't got money to invest in tech enablers. I haven't got
Yep.
money to invest in advanced training. I'm looking at how I save money. Maybe
Yep.
that's not the right statement, but it's probably a prevalent mindset. I'm looking at how I save money, and it's certainly not saving money by investing in more tech enablers. It's certainly not saving money by investing in mental health and well-being
Sure.
programs and training.
Sure. And then storms are a great analogy, right? So you could look at the extremes that happen in the US, right? What does everyone do? They go, you know, lots of people lose their businesses, homes, tragically, horrible, and we've seen that very recently. You know, the thing that always comes to mind is people getting down in a bunker underneath their home, you know, closing everything down and then dealing with the damage afterwards. You know, if you are, you know, or you will flee the storm, right? You'll go and do something else, etc. You know, there are you know, from an analogy point of view, you could say, well, you know, there's nothing I can do about it, right? And there probably isn't, but there are strategies.
Well,
You know, so you've got an impending hurricane. It may or may not hit, we know.
there are other things you can do, right? Because I think that the analogy that you drew there with there being a tornado shelter in the basement, right? That's one way of looking at it. If you are on a ship at sea and there's a storm coming, you do other things, right? Have I got everything in place? Am I, you know, have I battened down the hatches? Yes.
Yeah.
But have I made sure that the engine's not going to die on me? Have I made sure that I'm pointing into wind so that I'm not, so I can ride out and ride over these waves as they hit me?
And this was the idea, right? I was going to say it's where you want to come out of that.
Yeah.
You know, quite simply, you can sit there, hide, you know, consume stuff, get rid of all these things, or, you know, is there a case in there that you want to come out slightly better than everybody else that's doing similar stuff, you know? And if that's true, then we know there needs to be a level of investment. You know, is it an opportunity to cut costs? Yeah. Right. You know, could getting people could you know, reducing your headcount, you know, win you some of that? Yes, in the short term. You know, will you lose people who could potentially help you in the future? You won't know, right? And we can't predict the future. We all know that. But it's just a strategy, and but all too common strategy is, you know, we look to the people first as the biggest cost, rather than enabling people to do better at their jobs. You know, being a cost factor.
Oops. We might be able to say that those people are your biggest lever for maximizing growth and revenue, though.
Yeah.
If you were to look at it through a different lens.
Yeah.
So,
well, you wouldn't have hired them unless they were, right?
Well, you would hope so.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, you're going to build a car garage, right? And you're going to do maintenance on cars. You know, you're not going to go to Halfords, right? You know, and buy all your tools. You're going to go, hopefully, you know, you'll invest, and some garages do, and they invest over time, some don't. But it's you wouldn't buy a tool for the sake of buying a tool. You know, you'll buy that tool to, oh God, I'm going to get all sorts of hate because I'm not calling people tools. They are not resources. I'm not I'm not just trying to draw an analogy of investment, people. I'm not people are not tools. Some people are, right? But yeah, that's a whole different classification zone.
Okay.
But I guess again, it's just that investment piece, right? I just think I think people have a huge amount of value, and and it's easy to pay lip service to that, and without recognizing there's more to it.
Yeah. So is the core kind of underlying message, and if we were to wrap this up and then and think about what our next steps might be, there's some key messages there that people are assets, and when you empower them, you enable them, you get, you can reap benefits. And in lean times, there's a risk of looking at your business as a whole through the wrong lens.
Oh, you avoided saying holistic then. I like it. I was going to wind you up and say holistically as a model. I think really what I'm saying is as a way of picturing a state of what, God, I'm gonna have to say agile, right? What people talk about in agile, we have a whole bunch of people running around talking about this stuff. You have a whole load of people talking about this stuff, whole conferences and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. I'm not, again, don't take any kind of negatives away from any of this stance. This is just what I see, and you have a community of people, and like myself, which are kind of like, oh, but the people thing's really important. I'm not trying to say this is the most important one. I think we just need to bear in mind that these three things exist, and we need to be paying equal attention to them. Don't, if you are a leader, CEO, etc., don't get sold by the agile coach coming in saying it's all about transformation and it's all about business agility, because yes, that's true, but these two things exist as well. And then lip service will pay to DevOps. Oh, we need to put DevOps in place. What is it? It's just about providing quicker stuff. No, because DevOps comes with people. Business agility comes with people. So, yeah, to yes, and what you were saying is, yeah, this is awareness, but understanding, right? And I think that's the big thing. This is growing, and that's really cool. We just need to marry it into the other things now.
Yeah, I'm thinking what I would love to do, right, based on the work that you're doing with your psychology training and stuff like that. I would love to look at some of the stuff around comms and messaging, because I've seen some really terrible leaders who are in that business agility space, if you want to call it that, who communicate out to people who are sitting in the organization in a frankly terrible way. And I'd love to better engage with them to help them to understand how they can actually build mental health well-being and psychological safety in by their communication.
I think, and that's a great topic. And actually, I think it's more than just that. I think it's about drawing the chasm. Go find a better word, but maybe the chasm is the right word. But the strategy chasm, where we see this all the time. Go and do some work for me, brilliant, and I'll come back and shout at you when you haven't. It's a terrible way of saying it, but that's the disconnect, right? The disconnect between you as a very senior boss of an organization. You have your own worries, your own things, right? But you also have one eye on what's going on, and that eye only sees a very, very small perspective. And I was saying this when we were walking and talking, something my mum said to me, which is that idea that you assume everyone sees what you're seeing, that kind of whole perspective. And so when you're part of the doings, you're assuming everybody else is seeing exactly your perspective, and when you're up there, you're assuming everyone's seeing that perspective. And I think that's really, again, from an awareness and understanding point of view, a really interesting thing is the being open and candid about the information that would be helpful and useful in order to kind of convey the messages between the two. But also that chasm, there needs to be that closeness. It kind of goes back to my idea around everyone should feel empowered to run a business. As if you, I'm sure that's isn't it in one of the, it might even be in the Daniel Pink thing, which is, I got to say, it's there's something. Yeah, so there's definitely an animated thing which is all around. Is something along those lines that I think it is in the Dan Pink video where he talks about people feeling like they run the business or something. So I'm not kind of making it up. I might have nicked it from there, so massive apologies. But I really think it's true. And so that whole communication piece is really interesting as well. So yeah, let's if you want to go on to that in the next topic, let's do it.
Okay, no, that's good. what I'm going to propose we do is we at least stop the recording now. Yeah, and then we can continue and decide what we want to do next. Does that make
Yep.
sense?
Yeah.